moving right along, guys, the point order is going to be a way for you to also display the relationship here. And so with point order, what's happening is, and this is where I'm going to show you what flattening does. Actually, I deleted the panel a little prematurely here. So yeah, we're still with the flip matrix list. When I plug point order in, it's showing you these arrows that show you the direction of where your data is going and in what order. So if I did a pattern of circles, right, my pattern of circles is first going to apply to the 0 index item. Then it's going to apply to the 1 item, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. And you follow the arrow, and that's what it's going to do. So if I was to create a list of circle radiuses, radiuses, we would be able to apply it. So let me just go real quick. I'm going to kind of do like a growth pattern. So I'm going to say 0.25 and 0.5 and 0.75, 1, 1.5, and 2. Hit OK. So I can modify this list. And if you recall using scale, it was found under transform, and affine under scale. So now this is going to request the geometry to modify, the center points of the geometry, and then the scale factor. So we don't really have any geometry yet because we just created a grid. So our first step is to put a geometry on it. And so if I go to curve and primitive and I go to circle, it's going to ask for the base plane of each of the circles, and then it's going to ask for a radius. So the base plane, I'm just going to plug it in here, and without modifying the radius, we have, and let me turn down my size of my text here a little bit, we have a 1 foot circle applied to each of the points in my grid. And they all look the same at this point. Do I need to hold on for a moment for you guys to get here? Okay. So I'm going to resume what I was just telling you, right? So if I, just to recap for the sake of the video, right? If you get the error, if you plugged in a 0.5 here, let me just do it real fast. If you get an error like this for EX, right, it gives you this and it says grid extents cannot be less than 1, right? And so the metaphor that I used is if I take a piece of paper and I call it a cell, I'm holding up one cell. If I say I need half of a cell and I cut the thing in half and I hold the remaining item and I say how many cells am I holding? Well, it's half the size of the original cell, but it's still one cell. It's just a much smaller cell. So that's why you cannot have a grid extents that's less than 1, because it is an item value of 1. Even though it's half the size, it's still one cell. So, yeah, so, you know, the discussion is really about, think about these things as real items, not just numbers. So anyway, well, what was I going to go through? Oh, yes. So the sliders, right? I don't know that I explained all this about a slider in terms of like setting it up to be a different kind of number. So if you're producing, if you go here and you make something that has a 0.5, or in fact, I think the one that we had was from 0 to 0.5000 or something like that, right? So it can go from 0 and it can go to 0.5, but it's got all these trailing numbers. If you double click on the slider, did I explain all of these to you guys yet? Or no? I think I mostly just rely on whole numbers. So I might have done it very briefly. But anyway, to recap, you have your floating point numbers, which are essentially your real numbers, or your fractional values. And then you have the n, which is an integer. And so integers are going to be your whole numbers. and then you can also set it to even and odd. And then down here you can change the how many digits it has and all that other stuff. So obviously an integer doesn't have any digits at all because it's always going to be a whole number. Make sense? Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So anyway, moving on with this. So we have the circle, we have a pattern, we have the scale, and so if I modify the circles by giving it a new scale factor, I will be able to, let me move this out of the way too, I'll be able to create a pattern along the direction of these arrows. So 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So my smallest circle is going to be the 0, my largest circle is going to be the 5. So that looks like this. The geometry is going to be the circle. Now the center point is going to be the points that all of the circles were established upon. So that, notice how right now the center point is set to 0, 0, 0, so that's the origin. And so that's why when I did this, all of my circles have moved towards the origin and they've reduced in size by a scale factor of 0.5. Make sense? So without that value, I need to override it. So I override my center points to be this now. And the last item, now you see my smaller circles are in the middle. My last item is to plug in the pattern. The pattern is this. F. Multi-line data. There you go. Yeah, so I plugged it in before I switched it over to multi-line, or off of multi-line data. Actually, on that subject, so actually, let me just kind of finish that thought and then go back to the other thing. So now you can see if I turn my original circle off and if I turn all this other junk off so you can really see the pattern, this is what it did. We have small circle, a little bit larger, 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 larger. Okay? If I remove flip matrix, it would go back and it would do it the other way, but it would stop at the 5th number and then continue on with a large circle. Yeah? Okay, so let me clarify something real fast. I plug this in like this. I had it set to multi-line data. The reason that that's giving me an error is essentially because it's reading multi-line data as a string. And so let me just kind of show you an example with a one-liner, which you would think, and we've done this before, where we just say 0.5. And it works. I haven't changed the setting, but it works when there's one number. The very moment you hit enter, like that, and you hit OK, the panel reads it as text rather than a number because it's reading strings in multiple lines, like mtext in AutoCAD. So if you're going to do numerical values, like this, and it's going to be a list, you have to make it a list by turning off multi-line data. Okay, just a pro tip for you guys, in case you get lost or stuck. So how do you feel about all this fundamental stuff right now? Is it helpful to get back to this level of, simplicity and fundamental nature? I see small nods. That's better than the usual nothing, so I take that as a yes. All right, so I do want to, how are we doing on time for this one? Okay, so we're kind of closing in on 9 minutes for this one, so I'm going to stop this video. Then I'm going to show you why it's important to understand the length of your list in the next section so that you can begin to, modify it for whatever your parameters are on either end.